Happy Black History Month and welcome to the Defiant Lawyers channel. We are going to be talking about all three things Black history today. So stay tuned. You do not want to miss this. What's up? What's up? What's up? This is attorney Chloe Corbett, also known as the Duchess of Justice, and with me I have.
Attorney Augustus Corbett, aka the Minister of Justice. What's up, everybody?
What's up? We are the Defiant Lawyers. We provide legal analysis of trending politics, policies, personalities, and pop culture to empower each and every one of you all to defy this unjust legal system. So, before we get into today's video, why don't you go ahead and like this video? Subscribe if you're not subscribed. We have a lot of viewers who watch the videos who are not subscribed to the channel. So, go ahead and subscribe so that you can get all of the updates and become a part of the Legal Rebel community. But like I said at the top of the show, we are celebrating the start of Black history. Dad, what's up? How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Let me give a
Good.
shout out and applause to Black History Month.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, it started today,
Yep.
and but it's also special for another reason, right? This day.
It is. Today is the 110th anniversary of the birth of Rosa Parks. The of Birmingham, Alabama, that really woke white America up and showed that African Americans, when we come together and when we put our minds to it, we can really cause change in the right direction. And that's what that bus boycott did. We took our dollars away from that ecosystem, and I mean, the effects we're still feeling today. So we wanted to make sure we honored her. What do you think of when you think of Rosa Parks? That
Courage, bravery.
yes,
Um, I mean, she's a real shero. Um,
she is.
when you have, I'm 61. I'll be 61 in a few days, God willing. And so I grew up during the tail end of Jim Crow, right? So I remember segregation, sharecropping. I remember all that. And when you, especially in that day, stood up to the white power structure, you were literally putting your life on the line. And it's true today as well, actually. I mean, we got all kinds of examples still even today that Black Americans really take their lives in their own hands if they have the gall, to stand up to white people in this country. But back then, it was really, really, really very risky. And so when she was told to go to the back of the bus, and she said, "No, I'm not doing it." That was, I mean, she could have gotten beaten, she could have gotten lynched, literally, she could have gotten shot, all sorts of things. So the first thing that comes to my mind is bravery, courage. But then something else comes to my mind, and that is that case when, well, let me tell you what comes to my mind: unity. Because when she started that boycott, the powers to be in the civil rights movement, Dr. King, I think, let's see, Reverend Abernathy, they said that galvanized them. They said, okay, this is what we've been waiting for. This is what we're going to use to springboard the civil rights movement. And so, for a whole year, to make a long story short, for a whole year, Chloe, um, nearly every black Birmingham citizen stayed off the bus, and that was their primary way of getting to work for many of them. But they stayed off the bus and off the buses, and if somebody dare break the boycott and get on that bus, they would get a visit. They would get a visit from the black community. You know, like, why are you doing this? You need to stop this. We can't arrange for you to get to work. Stay off that bus.
Mhm.
And what happened is the businesses, the busing company, they all started feeling it financially. And so they are the ones who put the pressure on the political leaders to get rid of this segregation because it's driving us broke. And so after a year, they folded the white power structure. And it also resulted in the U.S. Supreme Court outlawing segregation in a particular case, slips my mind at the moment, in public accommodation. And then we know later on the civil rights movement, pardon me, the civil rights law was passed, which completely made it unconstitutional to segregate blacks in public accommodations, hotels, motels, restaurants. And Chloe, the thing is, that is the only reason why whites must allow us in their establishments, even to this day. Even to this day, if the Civil Rights Act of 1964 had not been passed, they still could keep us out of the restaurants.
Mm.
So for those folks who sometimes forget how tenuous our rights are, just think about how easy it is for a majority Senate and a majority House and a Republican president to repeal the Civil Rights Act of 64. Just that easy. That right would be gone.
Mm.
Ms. Parks, she started all that.
And what people don't know that is Mrs. Parks. Yeah. Yep. Let's give a shout out to her and honor her. What people don't know is that even before the Montgomery local chapter of the Montgomery NAACP, and she was a secretary for the NAACP. And she was involved in a lot of cases even prior to the bus boycott, with helping Black people and effectuating civil rights. She was also a part of the League of Women Voters. So she was out here even before that bus boycott, and a lot of people don't realize that.
Talk
But
that
she had
talk. Talk that talk, Chloe.
Yes,
Talk
she
that
had her
talk.
feet and her heels to the ground, fighting for justice for African Americans before and after the boycott. So there's a lot to honor her for, in so many avenues as women, as Black people, just anyone who is for the advancement of civil rights and for justice in this country. So we honor Mrs. Parks today.
Oh, okay. So when I put her up, it looks like the sound goes out. So
Mm,
all right, thank you, sweetheart, for letting me know that.
thank you,
Um,
Mama.
yeah. Okay. I can I want to put her up one more time, but I can fix the sound issue. I can fix that real quick. All right, so you still should be able to hear us now. Okay. All right, Chloe, you can talk. I think they can hear us now.
Okay. Yeah, and like you were saying that everyone listening, I mean, just picture a time where as Black people we had to sit at the back of the bus. We say it now, but I feel like a lot of people today don't realize the um how demeaning that would be. So the city of Montgomery, they had passed a municipal ordinance that segregated bus passengers by race. So the first few rows of the bus were set for white people, and the back of the bus was reserved for black people, even though most of the people that rode the buses were black. They were still subjugated to sit at the back. And not only that, but if the designated rows of the bus that were filled that were designated for white people were filled, the a black person could be ordered to move if a white person needed to take their spot. And a black passenger could not even sit across from the aisle from a white passenger as well. So it was demeaning, it was unjust, it was unfair. And finally, the local black population decided enough is enough. So with the help of the NAACP, that's where Rosa Parks came in. And she said, I'm not moving my seat. I'm sitting right here. I am an American. I'm a Montgomery resident. I don't have to move. And that one decision literally changed the nation and changed the laws that govern this nation as well. So I mean, it's just huge. I love reading and learning about it too.
Fast forward 2023, and there is not de facto segregation, but there's still de jure segregation. All right,
Hmm.
segregation in effect without it being law. For example, public schools are by and large segregated. Many neighborhoods, you go to almost any city, like here in Dallas, south of 30, it is heavily African American, and with all the problems that comes with a majority African American community, the poverty, the neglect of the city government, um, the lack of jobs, lack of opportunities, lack of affordable housing, um, many dilapidated houses, and so on. Go north of 30, and you got all kinds of Fortune 500 companies, you got Fortune 100 companies, you have great schools, you have tremendous jobs, you got these big homes. I mean, you got some of the richest people in America: Mark Cuban, Ross Perot Jr., uh, Jerry Jones, on and on and on and on. And so you still have that segregation. It's just that it's not required by law, but the Civil Rights Act of 64 just calls whites to accomplish segregation in another way. But it's still there. Let's be real. There is some integration, but for the most part, it's still there.
It is. And I think the fact that to that point, Dad, about there still being de jure racism, in her autobiography, Mrs. Park said, quote, people always say that I didn't give up my seat because I was tired, but that isn't true.
Mm-mm.
I was not tired physically, or no more tired than I usually was at the end of a working day. I was not old, although some people have an image of me as being old then. I was only 42. No, the only tired I was tired of giving in.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
woo, when I read that, I was like, that is powerful. She wasn't just, just some, just tired working class woman, down on her. No, this was a decision that enough was enough. This was an intelligent decision. And this was something where she said, the buck stops here. Things have to change. I love that quote from her. And then in her autobiography, she also said that, she was arrested for violating that segregation law. And she says she remembers asking the police officer, well, why do y'all push us around? And he said, I don't know, but the law's the law and you're under arrest. There it is in the crux. That's why voting matters, who we have in office matters, who's writing the law matters, the legislation that we have, because as he said, the law is the law. And even when it's not the law, you still have that de jure racism as well.
Yeah. 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 That's right. So, um, that's why changing the law is just so critical. Um, And so we're thankful for the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act. But, now folks have heard us say many times they have basically gutted the Voting Rights Act.
Yep.
Fair Housing Act, they have gutted it as well in many regards. The Civil Rights Act um, still has teeth, but it could be gone anytime. The last thing I'd like to say about Miss Miss Parks is later in her life she lived in Detroit, and I don't know if you remember Congressman John Conyers,
Mm-hmm.
the late John Conyers, who was a civil rights activist himself in the Congress. He is, I, wow, he sponsored the uh, reparations bill that Sheila Jackson Lee sponsors every year. He did so for like 25 years. Just each year, he just kept sponsoring the reparations bill. It hasn't been passed, obviously, but he just every year brought it up again to Congress. No matter who was president, no matter who was in the majority, there was little chance of it passing, but he kept bringing it up. I mentioned Representative Conyers because he employed Miss Parks later in her life. Um, Now, for her to have been such an icon, Chloe, unfortunately, it is my understanding that in the latter years of her life, um, we didn't quite do right by her.
Mm.
Okay, um, we didn't quite take care of her the way that we should have. We owed her a lot more. It's my understanding than what we gave her at the latter part of her life. She
Mm.
was she was a national treasure, especially for the African American community, and we should have just taken care of her. Um, let me let me pull her up again. Sorry about that; it went out again. But I did want to highlight on February um, 1st of wait a minute. Yeah, February 1st, 2013, I think, President Obama proclaimed February 4th, 2013, as the 100th anniversary of the birth of Rosa Parks. So she got a lot of things like that, a lot of those kinds of accommodations and commendations, but she was entitled to much more than that. So just wanted to throw that in. Um,
Yeah. Uh,
let's now go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I heard that too. In terms of the latter part of her life, kind of also the economic hardships that she suffered. It was hard for her and her husband to find jobs because they were activists. Um,
That's what that's
so
a that's what I'm referring to. The economic hardships. I mean, that's what I mean when I say we didn't take care of her the way we should have.
yeah, she deserved better.
As many wealthy African Americans that we have, billionaires now and many millionaires. When I heard that, I couldn't understand. I couldn't get my head around that. Um, and seemed like I heard maybe Oprah did something for her once all this hit the news. I know Oprah, um, or it's reported that Oprah bought Coretta Scott King a new home, a condominium or townhome or something of that nature. Um, I thought I heard she may have done something for Rosa Parks as well. And I know that there was a white guy who paid Mrs. Parks rent, if I'm remembering the story correctly, for quite some time. For quite some time, he did that. No one knew it. He did it secretly, and so I mean, when I heard all that, it was just it was shameful, quite frankly, that we had done that national treasure like that. I say we, I'm talking about the country, and especially African Americans.
Yeah.
All
Yep.
right, so we'll go now back and circle back to Tyree Nichols. There is so much still to say about Tyree's death. Um, as we got here on the screen, it's a sad start to Black History Month for us to be dealing with 5 police officers allegedly. I mean, this is the first time I feel like saying, even as a criminal defense lawyer, forget allegedly. We know what we saw. Beat Tyree Nichols to death. Beat him to death. And so that's how we're starting Black History Month in 2023. We cannot just go past that. Chloe, the funeral, I watched a lot of it. I didn't watch all of it. It's about 3 hours long. I got all of Vice President Kamala Harris's comments, and I got all of Reverend Al Sharpton's comment. And we want to play a little bit of both and talk about it on the other side.
Yes.
All right, let's go over there.
Good afternoon, church. Reverend Sharpton, I want to thank you for all you do for so many. There are so many families here who have been personally touched by your leadership and your strength and your fellowship.
Yes, let me point out that in the audience were the parents of so many people. George Floyd, some of his family members were there. Eric Garner's mother was there. Gosh, who else? Quite a few people. And when my wife and I were looking at this, we said, that is not a club that anyone would want to be a part of.
Yeah.
Anyone. But they were there in support of this family. So I just want to.
And it's also good to see the vice president that, um, we haven't seen her much the past couple years. So it's good to see her and see her honor Tyree.
Yes, it's my understanding that his mother asked her to come or invited her to come.
Love
All right.
that.
Reverend Dr. Lawrence Turner, thank you for welcoming us. Keisha Lance Bottom, Mitch Landrieu. We are here on behalf of the people of our country and our President, Joe Biden. And we are here to celebrate the life of Tyree Nichols. Mrs. Wells, Mr. Wells, you have been extraordinary in terms of your strength, your courage, and your grace. And we mourn with you, and the people of our country mourn with you. And I I'm going to be very brief. Mothers around the world.
The reason we wanted to go back and remember Tyree again is because these funerals happen so often, Chloe, that sometimes they take on like a circus or something.
Mm-hmm.
Some sort of television show. No, that's not what these are. These are funerals. That young man was beat to death. His family are grieving. And that grief, oftentimes when I've been through many funerals, I've preached a bunch of them. And oftentimes you really start feeling it after all the people are gone because coming up to the funeral, everybody's calling, everybody's stopping by, bringing food, loving on you, hugging you, kissing you, all of that. But right afterwards, when that funeral is over, when they put the dirt on your loved one, everybody's gone. And now it's just you, your grief, your thoughts, your loss, your family, and everybody else has moved on. The world has moved on. And you're feeling like, world, stop. Stop. Don't move yet, because I have suffered a grave loss. How dare you just move on? How dare you just move on like this? I need everybody to take a break for a week or two, at least 3, 4, 5 weeks, and grieve my loved one with me. But the world says no. We're moving on. And that's why we wanted to come back today and say, no, we're not moving on. This is too significant. And we want to continue to honor Tyree. And we also want to comment on several things that Vice President Kamala said, and several things that Reverend Sharpton said. So we'll go back.
When their babies are born, pray to God, when they hold that child, that body and that life will be safe for the rest of his life. Yet we have a mother and a father who mourn the life of a young man who should be here today. They have a grandson who now does not have a father. His brothers and sister will lose the love of growing old with their baby brother. And when we look at this situation, this is a family that lost their son and their brother through an act of violence at the hands and the feet of people who had been charged with keeping them safe. And when I think about the courage and the strength of this family, I think it demands that we speak truth. And with this, I will say, this violent act was not in pursuit of public safety. It was not in the interest of keeping the public safe, because one must ask, was not it in the interest of keeping the public safe that Tyre Nichols would be with us here today? Was he not also entitled to the right to be safe? So when we talk about public safety, let us understand what it means in its truest form. Tyre Nichols should have been safe. So I'll just close by saying this. I was, as a senator, as a United States Senator, a co-author of the original George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And as Vice President of the United States, we demand that Congress pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Joe Biden will sign it. And we should not delay, and we will not be denied. It is non-negotiable.
All right, that right there is what we wanted to hear, and that's what we want to comment on. We have commented on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act many, 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 many times on this show. You all need to hear us on this. You all need to hear us on this. The single most important legislation that can put a serious damper on cops beating and killing African-American men. be it white or black cops, because number one, it would abolish qualified immunity. Did I say qualified immunity? Qualified immunity, folks. Qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is the reason why these cops so brazenly put their knee on our necks, looking into the camera, not caring that they're being recorded, because they know they likely won't be prosecuted and they are protected in civil court. That means they're not going to lose a house. They're not going to lose their vehicles. They're not going to lose their pensions. They're not going to lose any of that. There'll be no loss because they're protected in civil court by qualified immunity.
I thought Vice President, her words were, I felt her heart. I like the length of her comments at Tyree's funeral, and I love that she ended just like what you were explaining, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. That, and we've gone, just like you said, we've gone into so much detail about the good that that piece of legislation would do if it landed on President Biden's desk. But what is a little bit disheartening, like we discussed last week, is you have people like Jim Jordan, who is the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who blatantly,
the House Judiciary Committee,
the House, thank you, the House Judiciary Committee, who blatantly said, I mean, what can the law do? We're not going to address it. They're wanting to focus on the IRS. They're wanting to focus on getting other representatives out of other committees, but not something that directly affects the Black community, and that is a source of violence and killing against us. So what does that mean? What can we do if we have people like Jim Jordan and his ilk in Congress? What can be done? We have to be proactive, and we have to have a voting strategy and get people in Congress who care about these issues, who care about Black life. Because Jim Jordan has shown that he doesn't, and other members of the Republican Party have shown that they don't, by their actions and their words as well. So it's time for us to be more proactive. We talk about this all the time on the show and off show, Dad, about how the Black community needs to be more proactive when it comes to strategy for getting things that will benefit our community, like the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, like keeping, the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act enabled and enacted. So it's time for us to put a strategy together. It's time for us to put voting back on the forefront of making sure that this country lives up to its ideals. So I love that Vice President ended on that note and reminding everyone that that's what needs to happen. And you saw how much Tyree's parents appreciated that as well.
Yes. And I think I heard someone say that Sheila Jackson Lee is going to be the person who is going to, resubmit it back, bring it back up, and will add to it a provision in Tyre Nichols' name that would require cops to stop something that happened that was going on like that. Currently, I read it just a few weeks ago. There's a U.S. Supreme Court case that says that police officers are not duty bound or legally bound to protect. We got protect and serve. That's what we think of, but they are not legally. According to the U.S. Supreme Court, the court has ruled cops are not required to protect anybody. So they can stand around and allow their colleagues to kill people. They could stand around like in Uvalde here in Texas. All those kids that got killed, may they rest in peace, a few months ago. I mean, those cops will not be held accountable for that. Okay, so so they are going to, Sheila Jackson Lee is going to include a provision in Tyre Nichols' name that requires police officers to say, no, stop this. No, we can't. And if not, they can be prosecuted. Now, there is a way forward, Chloe. I don't want us to feel hopeless. There is a way forward in terms of getting this legislation passed. And that is, so the Senate, the Democrats control that, right? The Democrats control the Senate. What is it? Is it 51-49?
Yeah, I think once the senator from Georgia, the pastor, Warnock, once he won, it became 51-49.
All right, so the Democrats control that. Now, the House is narrowly controlled by the GOP. It's narrow. I don't know how many, maybe 3 seats. Somebody, sweetheart, would you look that up for me? Because
it may be 4.
Okay, from what I'm seeing here, the GOP has 222 seats and the Democrats have 213.
Okay.
If that's current. This was as of December 7th, 2022. So that is what, not 10 would require 10 GOP folks to flip on this issue. Well, that's not impossible. There are some, I would imagine, some GOP folks that would look at that, look at what happened to Nichols, look at what happened to George and Tyre, and say, no, this is not right. This isn't right. I'm going to vote my conscience. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to break party affiliation and support the Democrats on this. That's possible. That's possible. You got Jeffries in there, who's the Democrat leader of the House. You have others in there who perhaps can develop some sort of rapport and relationship with some of their GOP colleagues and potentially get this done. So there is a way forward.
I'm going to choose to remain hopeful that some of the other side, the Republicans, will vote with their conscience, like you said, and realize that these are changes that would benefit everybody.
Yes.
I mean, the fact of the matter is the police brutalize white Americans and other races as well. So, for the protection of citizens in this country, everyday citizens, I will hope that would be impressed upon them and they'll come to the table and do the right thing.
All right, so let's go back now to the funeral, and we're going to hear a little bit of Reverend Sharpton's remarks and then come back and comment on that. And so let's go. And
before we do that, we have a commercial. Do you think now is a good time to put it in?
Now is a good time. Okay, so you all hang in there just a moment. And okay, well, maybe now isn't a good time. Okay, so let's hear Reverend Sharpton's comments, and then we'll hear it after that. Okay.
Perfect.
I want you to turn your attention very briefly to the 37th chapter of Genesis. It reads, "So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns and say that a ferocious animal has devoured him." May God add a blessing to the reading of his word. Early this morning before dawn, I did what I often do when I come to Memphis. I went out to the Lorraine Motel. As a youngster, I joined SCLC, Operation Breadbasket. I had been a boy preacher in the Church of God in Christ, and my mother was concerned when I was 12 that I was getting too involved in looking at activism and Adam Clayton Powell and others. She took me to my bishop, Bishop F.D. Washington, who said, I know what to do with him, and he brought me to Reverend William Jones, who led Dr. King's organization in New York, and Reverend Jesse Jackson. And at 13, the year Dr. King died, I was 13 years old, I became youth director of the chapter in New York. So it was my growing up in the King movement in the North after his death that makes me come to the Lorraine Hotel and look at the spot that Dr. King died. This morning I took my youngest daughter Ashley with me. And in all of the ice, I told the story of how Dr. King had came to Memphis to fight for garbage workers, city employees that had no safety. 2 had been killed with a malfunction. And here we are, Ashley, 55 years later, looking at the balcony where Martin Luther King shed his blood for city workers, for black city workers, to be able to work in the police department, work in sanitation. And the reason why, Mr. and Mrs. Wells, what happened to Tyree is so personal to me is that 5 black men that wouldn't have had a job in the police department would not ever be thought of to be in an elite squad. In the city that Dr. King lost his life, not far away from that balcony, you beat a brother to death. There's nothing more insulting and offensive to those of us that fight to open doors, that you walk through those doors and act like the folks we had to fight for to get you through them doors. You didn't get on the police department by yourself. The police chief didn't get there by herself. People had to march and go to jail, and some lost their lives to open the doors for you. And how dare you act like that sacrifice was enough for nothing? You ain't in no New England state, you in Tennessee, where we had to fight for you. And you take that position and do what we saw, and then some of y'all got all this mess on social media. Let me tell you something.
I've never heard Reverend Al Sharpton preach that. He was speaking some truth. I know him more as a political commentator. Watched his show. Never actually listened to a sermon of his. Never heard him speak. But the way he broke that down, the how angering it is that it was 5 black officers who did this when he and people that he knew gave their life, and he sacrificed much of his life for them to even be able to have a job with the police force and have a job with the government. I mean, I didn't think about that, but the way wow. Wow.
When I heard him say that, it was just perfect. It was perfect. It connected Tyree's death to the civil rights movement
Yep.
in a city, as he said. Now, I'm not trying to re-preach what he said, but in a city where Dr. King, the leader of the civil rights movement, was murdered. Those black officers should be ashamed of themselves,
Yep.
ashamed that they beat an innocent young black man, a skateboarder, a skateboarder. I mean, a harmless guy, a photographer, beat him to death, doing copycatting, like Sharpton said, copycatting the way white men have murdered black men in states like Tennessee, uh, where James Earl Jones, uh, is the one considered by many to have murdered Dr. King. Um, it was very eloquently put, very eloquently put, and
Yep.
the verse that he used with Joseph and his brothers. I don't know if people know that Bible story, but Joseph was sold into Egyptian bondage by his brothers. So they, sold him out like these 5 police officers did Tyree Nichols. It was very eloquently put. And by the way, he also preached George Floyd's funeral, and he did the very same thing. I mean, Sharpton is in his element when he's doing this. And he's been doing it all his life. Like he said, as a boy preacher, he started with this. And he talked about there with in Mr. Floyd's funeral how the knee on the neck of Mr. Floyd is the same way systemic racism is on the knee of the neck of black men, women in the black community um, in this country currently. So it was powerfully put then, and this was eloquently stated as well.
Yes.
Now, what I want to end on is we can't, you and I especially, we cannot, as attorneys, we cannot overlook the fact that many, many more African American men are murdered every year in this country by other African American men who are not in uniform, not in police uniform. And we seldom hear about that. You and I hear about it because we're attorneys and this is our space. So we hear about it. We oftentimes represent either the perpetrator of the violence or the victims of the violence. We see it leading up to murder um, sometimes, and we know that and we all know. I mean, we it just doesn't get the same attention. It just doesn't get the same attention. I don't cast any dispersions on Sharpton because he's doing a lot in Harlem and Brooklyn, throughout New York City, to try to deal with black on black homicide, and Ben Crump, I presume he does too. But they don't show up, and the cameras don't show up, and the reporters don't show up. The eyes of the nation don't show up when you know these young men are out here killing themselves a whole lot more than that are dying by the police's bullets. And I mean, I just feel hypocritical not to say that, not to mention that. Yeah, we need to do all we can, get rid of qualified immunity, do everything we can to address these horrible uh, blue on black murders. But we also, my God, the way young black men are killing each other, we also need to bring, maybe more so, need to bring attention to those murders, given the high numbers of them.
Yeah, as we mentioned so many times, homicide is the leading cause of death for black men in this country between the ages, I think, is 14 and 45. So, I mean, think about that. Not accidents, not sickness, not diseases, not uh, some type of environmental thing, homicide, killing each other. I mean, that's chilling that black men are killing each other at that high of a rate.
And
And
that's not true for any other group of men in the
exactly,
country.
exactly. So we need, just like I was saying before, we need to be proactive in coming up with strategies, whether it's voting, police brutality, but black on black crime too, economic injustice, the wage gap, all of these things that affect the black community
That's right.
so highly. We have to be proactive and coming up with strategies to address it. I think that's the key here. Instead of it just being, well, that's just how, well, black people kill each other. We have that own attitude towards ourselves. That needs to change. So I think it all starts up here, Dad. I think it needs to change. We need to know that we can strategize and be proactive to stop all this killing within our own community as well.
Yes, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. You hit the nail on the head as to what is the root cause of all this crime and violence and murders in the black community. It is poverty.
Yeah.
There are spiritual components, but it's poverty. It is, broken families. It is systemic racism at the root of all that stuff. Is systemic racism. The outgrowth of that systemic racism again is yes, um, broken schools, broken families, poverty, etc. And so instead of creating another scorpion unit, create some kind of unit to find out how to bring some jobs in Memphis.
Yes.
Okay, that's what needs to be done. Figure that out, city leaders. Stop depending just on law enforcement and deal with some of the root issues, the root causes.
Period. Y'all hear that? That's a PSA.
That's right.
That is
All
a
right.
public service announcement.
Well, Chloe, we're not going to be long today. Um, we had to get up here and say more about Tyree and certainly honor one of my sheroes, Miss
Yes.
Parks, the late Rosa Parks. And we also had to say something about the black blood that's spilled every day by other black men who are not in cops' uniforms. Okay?
Yes.
All
Is the
right.
commercial working or no?
All right. Let's see. All right. So, yeah, it should be working. Let's sort of go out on the commercial. We're going to end with it. Any parting words?
Thank you all for joining us again today. This has been a good discussion, Dad. I look forward to discussing the trending topics with you next week. Like the video, you all. Show us some love. We appreciate all the support.
Yeah, I think you all going to love this commercial. This is Chloe uh, that this commercial features and kind of telling you and sharing with you why she um, pursued law. Has nothing to do with the fact that her father's a lawyer.
That's one of the main reasons.
But just some things that she experienced that sort of pushed her in that way. So I think you're going to really enjoy this video. All right, and we will end after that video.
And he knew if he could just get mother, that they would quit beating him and quit stomping.
Ever since I was a child, I've always hated bullies. I was that child. If I saw another kid getting picked on in class or at the lockers, I would stand up for that kid. I couldn't stand seeing bullying. But there was one incident with a teacher that almost silenced me. It is my first clear memory of racism and discrimination. It's still so vivid and clear in my head. I remember one day we were in class one afternoon, and there was some school pep rally going on. My teacher decided to hand paint butterflies and flowers on our faces in anticipation of the school event. So we all went one by one up to her so that she could paint our face. When it was my turn to get my face painted, my teacher told me, "I can't paint your face because your skin is too dark." I was mortified, embarrassed, and deeply ashamed. In that moment, even though I wanted to say something, I couldn't get the words out. So I walked back to my desk, I sat down, and I stared blankly at my desk until the bell rang. When I got home from school that day, my parents knew something was wrong. But I remember being so reluctant to tell them. I really don't know why. When I finally did, obviously they were furious. And let's just say the next day at school was one to remember. But this incident taught me a valuable lesson. It taught me to always stand up against racism, discrimination, and injustice. It fortified my resolve to fight for the vulnerable and voiceless. Just like my clients' voices are taken when they are wrongfully accused of a crime, subjected to banking while black, fighting for custody of their children, or fighting for just compensation from stingy insurance companies. My name is Attorney Chloe Corbett, also known as the Duchess of Justice. I am one half of Corbett & Corbett Law Firm and the Defiant Lawyers. We're here to fight for justice for the accused, the oppressed, the vulnerable, and the voiceless. You can find us in Dallas, Texas. Go to our website, www.corbettfirm.com. Improving lives and impacting laws.